Thank you for joining the Gap Mastermind, where we cover topics around growth, action, and productivity. We bring these calls each Monday morning at 9 a.m. Pacific time, 11 a.m. Central, and 12 o'clock noon on the East Coast. And we have a special speaker today, our very own Bobby Davidowitz. He's going to be talking about investor season, and I'm really excited. Bobby has been such an amazing leader here, part of the Global Alliance. He leads organization of 2,000 agents, is the co-founder of the Alliance Group in our downtown Orlando location and beyond, and just an amazing friend, partner in this industry, and leader. And so I'm excited that he's going to present today for you all. So Bobby, take it away. It's all yours.
All right. We're getting it started today. So first and foremost, I want you guys to notice this hat that I'm wearing. I'm calling this World Championship Monday. For those who don't know, the town that I grew up in, at least in Orlando, I'm originally from Puerto Rico, so shout out. I see Puerto Rico's in the house. I see you, Maria. I see you. But I grew up in a place called Lake Mary, Florida. And I always believed that it was a very, very special place. And I know not a lot of people watch Little League World Series, but we are the world champions. We just played Chinese Taipei last night, and Little League represented the United States. Little League Lake Mary, Florida represented the United States in the World Championship. Yes, right. Let's go Lake Mary Little League. Stand up. So I'm calling this Championship Monday. So what a great way to start. I literally went to my boy works at Celebration Title. I was like, I need a Lake Mary hat because his son plays Lake Mary Little League, and I made sure that I wore it today. And also because it's time to kind of turn a new chapter. We need to start talking about winning championships, right? I feel like we've been playing a little bit defense, Rebecca, right? Like we've been like, oh, this NAR thing's coming. It's all about contracts. It's all about, that kind of stuff. And now we need to turn the page. Now we need to be like, okay, let's get back to the mission. The mission this year, at least for our culture in downtown Orlando, was multiplication. That was our word for the year. We're going to multiply, right? We know what this season is bringing, and it's bringing multiplication. But it's time to just worry about winning championships. Everything else we're going to figure out, guys. Whatever's out there, the contracts, you're going to figure it out. Get your resources, whatever. It's time to multiply. You're going to make more money than ever. Now, I was asked to do the Gap Mastermind. They're like, what do you have in your bag of tricks, or what are you going to teach Bobby, whatever. And I was like, I'm just going to stay on the same theme of investor season, and I'm going to take you through that, and I'll explain what it is in a second. I'm going to share my screen here. All right, let's see if this works. All right, do you guys see my next slide in this one? You do, right? I don't like that. Hold on.
Yeah, we can see your preview.
Yeah, I don't like that. I'm going to change that up. Nope. I want play from current slide. How about that? There we go. That's what we want. So let me take you down a little bit of a rabbit hole of how I got here. So investor season originally started from the premise that, we've been through these times before. I'm part of a mastermind group where we actually study what's happening in the real estate market, what's happening in the economy. And it just seemed like, things were bubbling up, right? Like, the guy that mentors me as far as investing is concerned, has essentially predicted the last 4 bubbles, because there's actually indicators of these things that are happening. So originally investor season started as, oh, we got to prepare agents for what I'm calling investor season, like this season where investors will flood the market, and we got to educate agents on how to, work with investors. And I said, be an investor. I think one thing that Gil and I always talk about is investment, because we're about growth. And you shouldn't be in real estate simply to do transactions, because eventually you'll realize that that's not going to fulfill you, right? That's not going to accomplish the long-term goal. And I believe everybody here has the same goal, which is you guys want to live life on your own terms, right? So you have to start getting into this mindset of your future self and what you have to do now, right? So it started leading me down that rabbit hole, right? And then as I started teaching this, a class called Investor Season, which is, by the way, what you're going to hear today is brand new. It's nothing that I've done before. I just call it investor season because that's what it is, right? It's investor season right now. But anyway, when I started going down this rabbit hole, what I realized is I started looking around at some of the agents in our office, and not just our office. I mean, EXP, global alliance everywhere. But obviously, I have more contact with these guys, and I started looking around at who are the people really driving the energy, who's driving the growth, who's top producer in our office, who are all, and then I started because I'm like, man, I really want to be around people like this. If I'm going to grow an organization with EXP, if I'm going to grow something, if I'm going to scale something, then I want to be around the people I want to be around, right? And to me, it became very clear that it was the investor agent, an agent that understands certain things, right? That they understand that that growth is part of this, that you're not happy unless you're growing, that there's other levels to this, that you didn't come here to say, hey, I'm going to do a few transactions. Hey, listen, I'm going to do a few transactions a year and I'm going to be happy with that. Like, I really wanted people that are like, yeah, I have a plan. I want to get my family free. I want to be free. I want to build an empire. I want to go from agent to running a team. Like, there's this element of growth and ROI that these guys understand. And a lot of these folks, if you know them, have accomplished amazing stuff, even stuff we didn't know was, Brandy Trove came in, became an icon agent in her first year, never did real estate before. But I noticed that they all had an investor background or had a desire to be investors when they came in. And I was like, that's it. That's my avatar. I'm looking for the investor agent. So let me down that rabbit hole. And continuing down the rabbit hole, I realized, wait a minute, it's not just about investing. It's not just about money. It's a lifestyle, right? That investor is a lifestyle, right? And it involves three components. Number one is a mindset, right? When you have an investor mindset, you think a little bit differently than everybody else. You put value on things that other people don't know how to put value on. For instance, you're going to get an agent that comes in and says, Gil always says, listen, I wasn't the most social person, so I had to buy my friends, right? Which he means he had to buy leads, right? But you might go to an agent and say, hey, you can get leads, you can buy leads, and you can really grow your business. And the first thing they think about is like, yeah, but how much does it cost? Then you got another person that might say, yeah, how much is the investment? Because they know they're going to get a return from that thing, right? They think a little bit differently. They don't, all these guys you just saw me put on the screen invest in their business. They invest in themselves. They have a mindset for growth. So there's a mindset component to this. Number two is that there's a strategy component. So, there's actually a smart strategy. Me and Gil always go back and forth on it. We talked about this morning about systems. Like, I'm always like, Gil, we need a system for that, right? What I'm really saying is we need a strategy for this. Like, we shouldn't go about this willy-nilly, and you shouldn't either. Building your investor life, building wealth, you shouldn't go, you should have a strategy. You got to understand who you are and what you want. And it's going to be different for everybody, by the way. And we're going to talk about that today. And number three, there's a spiritual component to this, right? That there is instead of pay it forward, I'm going to say there's an invest it forward component to this, right? That this is more than just money and things like that. That this has a spiritual foundation, and I'm going to talk about that today. So I've been working on, even Gil doesn't know about this. I've been working on an ebook. So nobody's seen the ebook. It's out, it's not out, but I decided today to kind of go over every chapter of the ebook, because those are the 10 principles that, things that I've identified. And by the way, I'm not by any means the expert investor or, wealthy beyond measure, but I do study this, I do study it. I do invest. Gil and I invested in commercial properties together. Like, we're in the game, but now that I know it's a lifestyle, I'm able to give you some principles that maybe help you build the investor life that you want. So the book is called Get Your Head in the Game, a mindset playbook for the investor life. Okay. And I started off with this page, and it's one of my favorite, one of my favorite quotes from a movie called Rounders. I don't know if any of you guys have seen the movie Rounders, but now you should. But it's essentially about poker. And Matt Damon plays this character, and he goes through a tough loss, right? Like, he decides one night that he's gonna put all the money that he's got and play in this like Russian mob game, and he loses all his money. And so he goes into this kind of dark place where he's like, man, like, I took my shot, I lost. let me get back to just kind of grinding it out. And he has this mentor who's basically made a living from playing poker. And he's a grinder, right? He thinks taking chances is not smart, right? He's like, listen, I feed my family with poker. I'm not taking any chances. And he says this line in the movie: you can't lose what you don't put in the middle, but you can't win much either. So he comes to this realization as he's grinding it out, that sometimes when you're just grinding it out, your whole life can become a grind. And you do have to take your shot, and you do have to take your chances. So you can't lose what you don't put in the middle, but you can't win much either. So you've got to make a decision, right? Whether you're going to play this game, where you're going to take some risks, right? But you got to make some smart risks, and we'll talk about that today. So here's the playbook. There's 10 plays, essentially 10 chapters, right? Obviously, I have a sports and football background, so everything's a play. So here's the plays, right? Wealth is not something you do; it's something you become. Be a long game player. Your first best investment. Make great bets. Don't gamble. Watch the clock. Stack chips. JOMO, which I'll explain. Fewer better deals with fewer better people. Start with the end in mind, and God wants you to invest. Okay, so it's game time. Let's do it. So play one. Wealth is not something you do, it's something that you become. And what I mean by that is that there has to be a change in lifestyle most of the time. It's hard to admit sometimes that we might not be the person we need to be to reach the goals that we want to hit. But we have to understand that that's where we're at and change those things, right? We're going to have to start saying yes to things we used to say no to, and no to things we used to say yes to. Okay. So you have to become somebody different. And I remember hearing this in a Tony Robbins event, where one of Tony Robbins' main guys stood up on stage, and he's like, he had this really nice like watch. He's like, I'm a watch enthusiast. He's like, I got a bunch of watches like this, and maybe the watch was like a $30,000 watch, and some people are like, what do you need to have that, and he was like, you know what, man, it's not about this. It's not about this watch. It's about who I had to become in order to afford this watch. And that stuck out to me when I was in that Tony Robbins event. I was like, man, it really isn't about that. Like, I'm not a materialistic person, but I understand having nice things. But there is something to be said for the fact that, like, if he wants it, he can have it, because he's done the work. He's become the kind of person who built a business. He's become a person who made decisions, and it's about the journey for him. So when he looks at that watch, he doesn't see 30,000. He sees the man that he became. So I love that aspect of it. So what are some principles about becoming the person you have to be in order to build wealth in your life? Number one is, I believe that wealth is an area of study. A lot of people are like, hey, I want to be this thing. And then, I'll give you a perfect example. I used to be in the music industry, right? And I decided to do a music industry seminar in Orlando, Florida. Nobody had done something like this. I brought all the major hip hop labels down, all this stuff, right? And this is what I wanted to do. And I just put a plan out to do it. I did it, spent a ton of money, lost my butt on this thing. Like, literally, like, I was dejected. And I'll never forget this. I was doing something else in entertainment. I was like making an independent film, and I was sitting with a director, and he had a book on his shelf, and he gave it to me. He's like, hey man, did you ever read this book here? It's like, it was like doing seminars for dummies, or like seminars 101. And it occurred to me, I had never once in my life done any research or read a book about doing a seminar, but I did one anyway. And I was like, I'll never do this again. Like the information is out there, guys. So, I want this to be the beginning, not the end of your journey when it comes to studying this. Become a student of this, because this essentially will buy your life back. If, right now we do a lot of things that we spend a lot of time doing things that we would rather be with friends and family or do something else. Well, this is how you do it. So it's very important that you study it. Money is simply a tool, right? I see all the destructive things we're taught as a society about money, and I just need you to know that it's just a tool, right? Like, anybody who knows me knows I'm not a very handy person. Don't ask me to fix nothing, okay? But even I have a hammer in my toolbox, because a hammer is really foundational and important. If you're gonna have a toolbox, you're definitely gonna have a hammer in it, and that's all money is, right? You can do something great with a hammer, you can do something terrible with it, but it just depends on whose hands it's in. And number three is, money doesn't equal wealth, right? And by the way, throughout this presentation, I'd love for you guys to be writing down anything that kind of sticks out to you that, that shifts you anyway, or anything like, oh, okay, I want it. So at the end, if you have any questions, cool. So let me ask you guys a question now in the chat. So I say money doesn't equal wealth. And what I mean by that is like, money is just one part of what wealth is, because there's value assigned to different things. And I'm a believer that you guys, everybody on this call, already owns the most valuable asset that exists, right? I'd love for you to put in the chat, although I can't see the chat right now. What is that asset? You already own it. It never goes down in value and always goes up in value. What is it? I'll put the chat. All right, there's the chat. One person said knowledge. Literally, never, literally, as we're on this call, it's going up in value. And by the way, towards the end of your life, it goes up exponentially in value. Let me get one more guess in here. Somebody gonna get it. Yeah, some of my people. Okay, exactly right. It's time, right? So knowledge, all those things have value, and that's what you got to understand about wealth. It's not just about monetary things that have a price tag, is what you put value on that brings wealth, right? So you have to know how to value things that don't have a price tag on it. Let me give you an example from a really great movie. Has anybody ever seen this movie? Does anybody know what this movie is from? I got some New Yorkers in the house. You know what I mean? But for those who don't know, this movie's called The Bronx Tale, right? And there's this part of the movie where this kid on the right, so this he's basically being mentored by a mob boss, right? He's just a young kid from the neighborhood, grows up. And one day he's standing on the corner, and this guy from on the other side of the street walks by, and this guy here in the picture, the kid, starts shouting at him, like, yo, where's my money? Blah, blah, blah. And he's about to run across the street, and the mob boss guy grabs him. He's like, what are you doing? And he said, that idiot owes me $20. He goes, no. You just paid $20 to get rid of that guy. So you see the value shift where he's like, no, you actually got something for that money. And that's how an investor thinks. There's other things that are valuable besides that. And peace is one of them, right? So play number 2 is be a long game player. Okay. So I love the story, the tortoise and the hare, right? And most of us know the story. The tortoise is slow, but he's steady, right? And then the rabbit, he goes and he's cocky. And the rabbit's like, listen, I'm fast. I'm gonna go take a nap. Everything's gonna be fine. But this turtle just keeps doing what it does, right? Just one step in front of the other, just keeps going, and eventually the tortoise wins the race. And then the great lesson is that slow and steady wins the race. And I used to hate this story because I was like, who wants to be slow and steady, right? Like I just didn't appeal to me, especially when you're younger. You're like, slow and steady, that sounds boring to me. But I realized that this is about this story is about the long game. And what the long game is you understand that there's something in the future that you're working towards, and you're just putting one foot in front of the other to get there. And you got to be a long game player, because it doesn't always happen overnight. Okay. So let me tell you how a long game player might think. Okay. So this is obviously a beautiful car, right? This car is actually 400, like I looked this up, it's $440,000. Okay. Now you could get to a stage where you say, wait, I can afford to get this car. But a true long game player will say, wait, yes, I can afford it, but is it going to set me back from my long game goal? Do I need this car, and why do I need this car? Is it because I need to show off and I need to do this and that? Or is it actually going to do something for me? Is there a return that I don't know, right? Is it going to build some kind of confidence in me that's going to lead me to a bigger deal, or whatever the case may be? But the reality is that, the concept of delayed gratification is a long game concept, right? You don't need to buy a whole bunch of stuff that's going to set you back from your long game wealth goal just to show people whatever it is. Now, once again, there's value to everything, right? If it builds confidence in you, whatever. But just understand that if you ever see somebody driving a car like this, the only thing it says is that you can afford a payment and that you're $440,000 less wealthy. That's all it says. Now, they might actually have it like that, right? They might actually have it like that, but I'm just telling you, this doesn't say much. And most long game players are going to say, hey, let's wait a little bit on that until this is a nickel. Like my uncle Gene Frederick says, hey, when this is a nickel, we're going to buy as many of these as we want. Okay. And here's another reason that you might want to be a long game player, because this is what life looks like. This is what investing looks like. This is what building your business looks like. And this is actually an exponential curve, but you see this real messy part, like right here. We're all going to go through that messy part, and you have to understand that you're in it for the long game, because when it gets messy, this is where people drop out. I mean, it's already happened in the industry. It happens in every industry. It happens in everything, right? You're going to have to go through some kind of desert in order to get to the promised land. It's built into the system, right? So you have to be a long game player to understand that you have to withstand these things and withstand the emotional turmoil, withstand the setbacks, withstand all that to stay in it for the long game. So let me give you an example of this. This guy, this is not the actual guy, but everybody's heard of a guy named John McCain. John McCain was a politician, but also a prisoner of war. But the highest ranked prisoner of war prior to John McCain was Jim Stockdale. And he, he was in a prison camp, and those are not fun. And he was in a prison camp for a long time, and he was tortured on a daily. At a couple points in time, he was thinking about potentially committing suicide, so he wouldn't give up secrets. Like, this is how harsh the conditions were. And somebody asked him one time, he's like, it must have been really depressing in that prison. And he said, no, it wasn't actually. And he was like, really? He's like, no, not really. He goes, I always knew I was going home. I always knew. Like, I had faith I was going home. And he's like, wow, like, that sounds really overly optimistic. And he goes, let me ask you this, who didn't make it? He goes, the guys who thought they were going home by Christmas. Those are the guys who didn't make it. And what that means is that you have to plan like a pessimist, but dream like an optimist. You have to understand that it's a long game, right? And you have to get in that mindset that you might not go home by Christmas, but you're going home, right? So that's long game player. Play number 3 is your best first investment. Now, what do you think I'm going to tell you guys that your best first investment is? And then, by the way, this is what happens when an agent comes to me and it was like, there you go, Joe's on it. Joe's on it. Exactly right. So, an agent will come to me and they'll say, they'll start closing a few deals and they say, hey, I've got 10,000, what should I invest in, Bobby? And I'm like, hey, that one's easy. Cause you're probably not going to get rich off of investing 10 grand, but you will get rich if you invest in yourself, because that has one of the highest ROIs that there is in the game. Right. And you have to understand what investing in yourself actually looks like. So what does investing in you actually look like? Well, one, let's just briefly talk about health, right? So none of this matters if you're not here. So I think investing in you also means that you're going to be mentally, physically, everything fit, because you're going to have to be physically and mentally and spiritually healthy to survive in the long game. If you're going to make it to the long game, you got to be there. So I just want to say a little touch on that health part. But really what I mean by investing in yourself usually is one, it's, sometimes education. Right? Are you, when I said wealth is an area of study, are you educating yourself? Are you going to the right events? Are you continuing to level up your game and invest in yourself? Right? I always remember, going to Tony Robbins with Gil and being there and him saying, hey man, they got this thing, it's $10,000. And at that time that was a big blow to my bank account. And he told me that he talked to me just like an investor. He said, but you can't think about what you're spending. You got to think about what you'll lose if you don't, because there's a high return on this, right? And then there's relationships. And to me, this is one of the things that you have to invest in. And it's made all the difference for me in my lifetime. The reality is that one person can change the entire trajectory of your life. One person, one contact, one person who can move a big piece can take you from getting to your wealth in 20 years to getting there in 5. I mean, it's that important that you're out there going outside and getting in relationships. A great example of this is a group that I'm part of called Access, which is what relationships often do. Remember, all great opportunities usually come through another human being, and you wouldn't have seen that opportunity unless you had that relationship. And that's why I love the name of the group, Access. It's giving me access to things that I didn't even know about. For instance, right now, I never even knew I would be this guy, but currently I'm actually very little invested in real estate and a lot invested in startup fintech and prop tech companies. I didn't even know I liked investing in companies until I went to this group, and then they started introducing opportunities, and I'm like, man, I love this because I love betting on people. I like to be behind the mission. I like to understand. I like to be behind companies that are changing industries. Like, that excites me. I didn't even know that until I went to this group called Access. And that's the power of going outside. That's the power of saying, hey, let me go to something even outside of my industry and understand that. Let me give you another example. I went to a conference called the Global Entrepreneurship Conference. Why did I go? Because, I have a vision and a plan to be in Puerto Rico in the next, 12 to 24 months, at least part of the time. And I wanted to understand what was happening in Puerto Rico entrepreneurship wise, because I don't get to hear that from my family. All my Puerto Ricans in the house, all your family will tell you about the problems. There's government problems. Everybody's corrupt. There's nothing good going on in Puerto Rico. That ain't true. You got to go outside and see. So I go to this conference, right? And pro tip, when you guys go out there and you're investing in yourself, don't go to a conference and then not do nothing, right? Like, you're going there to meet people, build relationships, whatever, get involved. So one thing I always do, pro tip, is always ask questions during question and answer. Because in a place that's hard, and Eli's saying, hardest for me, relationships, nurturing them, you want an easy way to build relationships in a conference full of like hundreds of people. When there's a question and answer and they give you, and there's an opportunity to have a mic in your hand, when you ask a question, the whole room knows you. And people will walk up to you after because you asked a great question, or they were like interested in what you had to say. But hey, having the courage to ask a question. So I did that. I literally was in a small room, maybe like 50. It was a workshop. And I raised my hand during question and answer. And I said, listen, I'm thinking about moving to Puerto Rico, and I want to know what the entrepreneurship landscape is out here. And I'm trying to learn and make some decisions. And the lady on stage says, well, actually, we're not really experts in the Puerto Rico landscape here, but you happen to be sitting next to the person you need to talk to. And it was this lady. And she's literally the director of a venture capital company in Puerto Rico. She was 2 seats to the right of me. No seats, nobody in between us. She literally like waved at me like, hey, it's me. like I'm like, okay, we're going to talk right after. But that's the power of investing in you, where I could go. And by the way, the conference was $150 investment for 4 days. And I met some incredible people out there. Hey, guess what? There's another investment you might want to make. So those of you might be like, oh, I don't know what to do next. Guys, if you don't have your ticket, it's I think I looked it up. I think it's $949 now is the ticket price. But if you could invest $949 and make an extra $100,000 a year, would that be a pretty good return on your investment from one thing that you learned at this conference, or one connection you made, one referral partner you made at this conference? Will it pay off? And people who live the investor life is like, easy work. $1,000, no problem. I know I'm going to get 10x at least on that. Play 4, make great bets, don't gamble. Okay. So this is what happens a lot of times when people really want to make money, and they get distracted by shiny objects, right? And somebody offers them something. Matter of fact, and understand everything has risk. Matter of fact, if somebody tells you invest in this, you can't lose, run, right? Because that's not true. That's not true. That's not how investments work. But you can make a great bet. There's always risk in everything that you do, but you got to be willing to make bets. That's why I put that Matt Damon thing there. Listen, you can't lose what you don't put in the middle. You can't win much either, right? So listen, there was a time in my life about, I don't know, I'd say around 2000, 2009 or something like that, where things were not going that well for me. There was a market crash. I had left, so I left the industry. I was trying to build my own little entertainment company. Didn't know how to do that either. Thought I could build it in 2 years, and I thought I could build it off of debt. Well, guess what? The debt ran out, and the bills came due, and the market was crashing, and my house was up underwater. So I ended up, I lost a few things, right? Like a house and a car and everything like that. But it put me in the worst situation to make an investment decision, which is a desperation situation. And sure, so this guy shows up, right? Calling this guy Charlie. So here I am. I got my last $35,000 left on a credit card. And this guy, Charlie, meets me, and he starts talking about some investment that he has. He's involved in the clothing industry. He brings clothing from South America. They're in different seasons. He resells them. There's money to be made and all this stuff. And at this point, I'm desperate. So I'm looking for a Hail Mary, because I know that if I don't make something win, like the house is gone, the car is gone, all that kind of stuff. So I made the investment. And guess what? Suddenly I can't get a hold of Charlie, right? And I'm calling him up, and he's like, oh, and then when I do get a hold of him, he's like, oh yeah, it's coming, or this is happening, and don't worry, and all this stuff. And sure enough, you already know what happened, right? I never heard from Charlie again. But that was a gamble, because what do I know about the clothing industry? Nothing. I barely know him. That was a complete gamble, Hail Mary. And what I'm telling you is, as an investor and the investor way of life, just make a great bet. You're not going to be 100% sure, but don't gamble. Okay? Play 5. Watch the clock. So I take this from a sports term, in sports, you got to do different things at different times, right? So in other words, if you're up a bunch of points and it's halftime, you have a whole another half to play. Well, you play it a little bit differently than if there's 3 minutes left on the clock and you're down by 3 points. You play the game completely different, right? And so the reality is that one of the number one keys to being a great investor is timing, right? Is understanding the clock. So I'll take you back to 2002. Okay, so let's go back, which, by the way, when I got into the industry, this was like, I got into the mortgage industry at that time, and interest rates were at historical lows. Everybody was buying real estate because that was the play. It's very similar to what happened after the pandemic, right? So we were in that game, and I want you to imagine that you're that person, right? And it's 2002, and you say, hey, you know what? I can buy, the money is cheap. Properties are still cheap, and you go and buy 10 houses, right? You buy 10 houses, and you're watching these houses just skyrocket in price. Like, you're just like, I can't believe it. 2003 passes, a little bit slow growth. 2004, 2005. Now you've made like $100,000 in equity on 10 houses, right? But then you're sitting there one day, and an old timer comes up to you, a guy who has some experience in the investor life, and he says, listen, I've been looking at the indicators of the market. Things look like they're going to take a turn, right? And they're like, yeah, but the prices are still going up. But the smart investor says to them, yes, but there's an 80% downside and only a 20% upside. I'd rather you get out at or near the top of a market cycle than to stay in it until it's too late. If you would have listened to this wise man, which, by the way, I had a guy like that. I had a guy tell me that. I had a guy who was a private lender when I was like 27 years old tell me that. If you listened to that guy and you cashed out, you would have made $1 million on your $100,000 equity on 10 homes. And you would have been prepared when the market completely crashed, and you would have been able to buy at bargain prices, but you would have been able to buy with $1 million versus what you started with. But if you didn't, you went bankrupt. That's what I did. Right? So that's the difference. Those two tales all have to do with the clock, with you understanding what time it is and what to do at that certain time. So my mentor, one of the guys who actually cleaned up during this time, right? So in these times, in this investor season that we're in, guys, you're going to see a massive transfer of wealth. Some people are going to win bigger than they've ever won, and some people are going to lose bigger than they ever won. That's the way investor season looks. But for those of you guys who are prepared and are studying this and are on this call today, I want you to be prepared for what's going down so that you can capitalize on it. And guess what? My mentor went to Harvard Business School in 2005, and he walked in and he gave a speech. He said, I'm taking my money out of the market. I'm taking it out of real estate. I think the market's crashing. And when it does, I'm going to Nevada and I'm buying as much property as I can. And they laughed him off the stage. Then the market crashed. He went into Nevada, bought as much real estate as he can. Now it's worth almost $100 million. So that's watching the clock. That's understanding what's happening and when it's happening. Okay. Play 6. Okay. Maria's invited me to Palmas. Are we going to Palmas? Yeah, we got to go to Palmas in Puerto Rico. So play 6, I call it stack chips. Guys, you happen to be in one of the best businesses, right? So I think that there's a difference in income and capital. Okay. So what I mean by income could just be what you're getting every month to pay your bills, right? And that's just a consistent, steady flow of income. Now, you can make a big enough income to turn income into capital. And what I mean by capital is a chunk big enough to push you forward in your investing game a lot farther, right? Or to buy you the time that you need in order to accomplish the things you want to accomplish. So in other words, there's a lot of people in their job right now who make just enough income to get by. Well, you don't have any freedom there, and you don't have enough to save to stack a bigger chunk of capital so you can make great bets. But you happen to be in a business that gives you both things, income plus capital, because in real estate, you can make some pretty big chunks of money on selling property. You know, there's not a lot of businesses where you can make 10,000, 15,000, 20,000 on the regular. And you could do that multiple times in a month. And suddenly you're like, oh shit, I had a 50 grand month. I had $100,000 month. And now you've got capital. You got money to pay your bills, but now you have capital. That means that you bought yourself some time. That means that if Gil comes to you and says, Bobby, I got this great investment idea. It's going to take 25 grand, which he's done before, by the way. Just walked up to me on the side of the street. He's like, I need 25 grand today. But you need 20, hey, I need 25 grand to make this happen. You say, that check's in the bank already. I got you. Because you got to be prepared. So you happen to be in one of the best businesses to do this, guys, and it's real estate. So a good thing to do for your investor life is to think about your production a little bit differently. Think about your production as the fact that you're stacking chips for the bigger plays. You are stacking chips for your freedom. You're stacking chips so that when opportunity comes, you're ready to pounce on it, because great investment opportunities last about this long. They do. When they come, they last about this long because everybody knows that they're good. And you can't be in a situation where you're like, oh, cool, I want to be a part of that, which we've all been there, right? We've all seen great investments pass us by because we weren't in a position. We hadn't stacked the chips that we needed. So I want you to think about your production now a little bit. Some people are like, oh, I'm trying to get out of production. I get it, but have you stacked enough chips to make the moves that you need to make? Because if not, you're in one of the best industries to stack some chips. Why not triple down right now in your production and stack as many chips as possible? So when things start shifting, that volatility starts to happen and that opportunity opens up, you're like, here it is. I'm in on that. Okay. So that stack chips, play 7, JOMO. So I use this story. So let's say you run into somebody you knew for like 20 years ago. Maybe you were like high school sweethearts, right? But you haven't seen them in like 25 years, right? You run into them at the grocery store and you're thinking you're going to do a high buy. And so you say, hey, hi, how you doing? You're expecting like, fine, good to see you. And then keep on walking, but they're like, oh, and they start telling you the whole life story. They're like, I'm going through a divorce right now. My 3rd divorce, and I've got this going on, that going on. My kids don't like me. I've got all this, and it's just like, and it's just a cloud of negativity. And you're just like, and all you're thinking about is like, oh, I got to end this conversation as soon as possible. Like, I got to get out of here, right? So I'll be like, oh, hey, cool, good seeing you. You go back to your car and you sit there for a moment and you're thinking of the fact that, you used to be the high school sweetheart with them, and now they've got all these issues. Not even the same person you used to know. That little feeling of relief you get is JOMO, and it's called the joy of missing out, right? It's the joy of missing out. We've heard about FOMO. It's the fear of missing out. The fear of missing out causes you to make all sorts of mistakes when it comes to investing, okay? But JOMO is something you should adopt, which is it's okay to let things go by you, especially if you don't feel they're 100% right. It's okay. You're going to get another opportunity, but there's going to be many times that your investor life will be dictated more by the things you say no to than the things you say yes to. Okay. So that's what JOMO is. It's the joy of missing out. It's like, hey, you know what? It's okay. It can pass me by. And sometimes, hey, maybe you did make a mistake, or I wouldn't call it a mistake. I would just say, maybe that thing did turn out well. Maybe it did, but it's okay because you know that there's more opportunity coming. So let me give you an example. Here's me and Gil with a guy named Sam. Sam saved our ass, because me and Gil were trying to buy this property, right? It was 2 acres. It was 45,000 square feet of warehouse space in downtown Orlando. And Gil and I had only a fraction of the money, but we had faked it till we made it. We were in contract without the money. And we really need to figure out how somebody was going to help us. So God sent us a guy named Sam. And what's cool about Sam is that, once we became business partners, essentially in this property, we got to learn some things from Sam. So Sam taught us 2 things. Number one is Sam said, you know what? The one thing you can't do is mess up your first big investment. Like, don't mess your first one up and wipe yourself out. Like, that was his thing. Like, don't mess the first one up, because it's really hard to get started back again after you do that. But Sam taught me something else that I don't know if he actually meant to teach me. But I remember talking to Sam maybe a year and a half after the pandemic started. And I spoke with Sam, and Sam said, when the pandemic hit, I took all my money out of private lending in real estate. I took all the money out. And he goes, because I just didn't know what was happening. I didn't know what the volatility was going to be. I couldn't predict it. And I just took my money out. Now, you and I, nobody knew that actually real estate was about to take off, right? He took his money out of real estate, but real estate was about to take off. Now, I ask you, did Sam make a mistake by taking his money out? Did Sam actually make a mistake? And what he taught me was, as I thought about it, I said, Sam did not make a mistake. See, Sam has a strategy and he's a smart investor. The reality is that Sam did not know what was about to happen. And Sam did not feel comfortable. And Sam said no to having his money in the game. And that was the right decision for him. It was the joy of missing out. Because here's the thing. If he doesn't have joy that he missed out on something, that he made a smart play, what will happen is he's going to tear himself up thinking, man, I could have made so much money when the pandemic, like when something like this happens next time, I'm going all in. And guess what? He'll do that next time, and then he'll lose his ass. Sam made a decision with the information. That's right, Maria. He made not only with the information he has, but according to his investment principles. And it wasn't a wrong decision for him. And I would venture to say not even for you, because that is the joy of missing out. It's okay. We'll catch the next wave, but you're not going to have all my money at risk or this much money at risk when I don't know what the heck is happening with the pandemic, right? So that's what he taught us. Indirectly, he taught us that. Okay. Play 8. This one's big. Fewer better deals with fewer better people. And this is what my mentor says. He actually has a third line: fewer better deals with fewer better people through fewer deeper relationships. And that's really important, especially when it comes to the investing games. So when it comes to the fewer betters, here's a couple questions to ask, right? So in particular in investing, but a lot of people talk a lot of stuff, but they never done it before. And this is a great question to ask. Somebody's coming to you an investment, somebody's coming to you an opportunity. Somebody said, great question to ask is, hey, have you done this before? You know, like, you know, and what are the results? Is there a track record? Is there something I can look at? Right? Can I see that you've actually had success in this very game that you're telling me that I need to invest my money, my time, anything in? Have you had the right results? Are you the right messenger for this? Okay. And this is a great question to ask. Who else has invested in that person? Right. So in my mastermind group, we have a 10-point framework to analyze these technology companies. But the number one thing you got to get right is the team, right? Is like, who are the people behind it? Because if that isn't right, if that doesn't feel right, you got to get out. That's Jomo, you know, like we're walking away from this. But one great way to vet other people is who else believes in them, right? Because I know that if somebody that I trust that is intelligent, that knows what they're doing, says yes to that investment with that person, it gives me a little bit more confident that I'm on the right track. Okay. And finally, do you like them? You know, like, you know, my mentor says, he's very quick to say, I don't do business with assholes. I just don't do business with assholes. I just don't. Like immediately, that's a hard no. Like, I don't care what you're pitching. Like, I just don't want to do that. You know, time is too valuable. You know, you don't have to do that. Do you like this person? You know, and by the way, it doesn't even have to be like or not like. I can tell you that sometimes it's just something doesn't feel right, or I'm pretty good with people. So if I can't read you, that's not a good sign. Like for me, like I'm like, it's not a good sign, man. Like, I mean, I usually I know who that is or who isn't that person, right? So keep that in mind when it comes to the fewer betters. Play 9, start with the end in mind. So I get this from agents a lot. They're like, hey, Bobby, what do you think about Airbnb? Should I invest in that? Do you think that's a good investment? That's all the information they give me. And my first question is like, well, depends. What do you want? Because a lot of things that, you know, this thing, investing or building wealth or whatever it is the same for everybody, but it's actually not. You know what I'm saying? If you tell me you want to make X amount by this date, I can tell you that, oh, that will actually work for you. But if you have some bigger goals, like that might not be the play, or it might be the wrong timing on that play. So you have to understand that. So what do you want? You have to ask yourself 4 questions. Okay. How much do you want? How much do you want? Because if you don't have a clear goal, to me, clarity is power. If you don't have the math problem together, you don't know what you're looking for, right? So Gil and I went to Fiji once to Tony Robbins' Wealth Mastery, and they had us do this really cool exercise where they were like, okay, they essentially was like, how much do you want, or how much do you need first? So first exercise was like, how much are your bills? How much money do you need to make passively in order for your bills to be covered? Okay, cool. How much do you need to make passively in order for you to have a great time, have some dinners, do some cool stuff? Cool. And then what's like the dream number? Like, what do you need to, you know, buy your mom a house, get the suite at at the Magic game, whatever the case may be. And then you had that number. And then they had us kind of reverse engineer, like if we put it in a decently safe account that was 7% compounding. Let's say it was a diversified stock account compounding at 7% interest for X amount of time. And you had to figure out how much money would you need to have in order to spit off the kind of cash you would need to live this dream life. When I was there, for me, it was $5.4 million. It was like, that would spit off like $333,000 a year in cash in that account. And that's what it would take. And I was like, the power it gave me to have that number, to understand, I'm like, I got something to shoot for, right? And if I want to get it by this time, then this is what I must do in order to get there. So the second question is, by when do you want it? You know, you have do you have a 5-year horizon? Do you have a 10-year horizon? Are you cool with a 20-year horizon? How old are you? You know, how much time do we got? Because there's some timelines that are, that are real, some are arbitrary, but you got to understand when you want it. What are you willing to What are you willing to risk to get it? So you have to understand that everybody has a different risk tolerance. So you have to understand yours. You have to understand that if you lose X amount of money, will this destroy you or will you be able to move on? Right? Like you have to understand what you're willing to risk to get something. And then you have to understand what you're willing to do to get it. A great story that I read in a book the other day. There's a guy named Ronald Reed. And Ronald Reed, you've never heard of him because and he was just a regular guy, and he passed away, and he passed away, and he had $8 million, like in his wealth was $8 million, and this was back in the day, so it's worth more now. But the amazing part was not that. The amazing part was that Ronald was a janitor, and people were just baffled by the fact that this guy had an $8 million in wealth, but nobody knew it. He lived very simple, very frugally, and all he did was stack his money away consistently and built it over time. But the question is do you want to build it like Ronald built it? Is that what you're willing to do? I don't want to be a janitor for 40 years and stack money. That's not the way I want to do it. So I have to have a different strategy than Ronald would have to do that. And you have to decide what's yours. And then finally, I'll end it with this. I know I'm coming up on the hour and I want to leave a couple minutes at the end. And is that God wants you to invest, right? And no matter what you believe, if you look around, you will realize that this world, everything's about growth. The signs are everywhere that we are meant to grow. Like we're not happy when we're not growing. We're not happy when we're not investing in others, investing in our family. You look at it, the fact that a little seed grows up into a gigantic tree is like, like we're meant to do these bigger things, right? And one of the main signs that I think pops up everywhere is that faith is a foundation of all great things. And so no matter what you believe, you know that you have to believe in things you can't see. And I believe that real estate is faith-driven sport, but so is investing. Investing, you have to believe in something in the future that you don't see yet, and you're going to have to walk through that desert to get there. And it's going to take a lot of faith to do that, right? And so you have to understand that. And then, on a more biblical level, I love this. This is my favorite parable. It's the parable of the talents, where a master leaves a certain amount of money to three servants. One gets one, another gets two, another gets 5 talents, which is an amount of money. And the master leaves for a while and comes back and asks these servants, "What did you do with what I entrusted you with?" And the guys that received the 2 turned it into 4. The guy received 5 turned it 8. The guy that got 1 just buried it in the ground because he was too scared to take a risk. He was too scared to invest his talent to produce a return. And so it's important that you understand that that's the lesson of investing in the investor life, is that we're given 3 assets to invest. One is time, one is talent, and one is treasure. And I believe that we're expected to invest it in people to bring an impact to others. And my final message is just invest wisely. So hope you guys enjoyed it. That's investor season right there. Handing off to you, Rebecca.
Wow, that was so amazing. I'm like taking notes. So I want to hear from our group here, Global Alliance. You've been listening, and every time you speak, Bobby, honestly, like I am blown away because I feel like one of your callings is being a preacher. I love how you wrapped it up with all those treasures that we've been taught, from a biblical standpoint, but how that is so relevant to our life today, and so true. Like, what are we doing with these treasures that we've been entrusted with? Time, talent, treasures. And I loved how you talked about, and by the way, if you have a question, you can pop it in the chat. We're here now to do a live Q&A, and or if you want to ask a question, please raise your virtual hand and we'll go ahead and call on you. But I was writing down, what some of the last things that you're writing. So what are you willing to risk? What are you willing to do for this, right? And I'm thinking, who are you becoming in all this process, because you talked to us about how when you started, you were putting a lot at risk and you lost it. And sometimes it takes that loss so that we can learn from it, so that we can bounce back from it, instead of kind of becoming that victim. We're either going to grow from this or we're going to retreat and shrink from it, right? And so I hear this and I'm like, man, this is amazing.
Yeah,
Okay, let me
and
check the
actually,
chat. Mhm.
I just thought, yo, Koo, do you have hair now, Koo?
Hey,
Oh my God, it's
bring
been.
him on here.
Yeah, I don't know
He
what I'm
needs
gonna
Is,
do
he
with
needs
is
this
to
that your
join
one.
us
twin
here real
brother?
quick.
Like, oh my God, I just saw Koo. I was like, Koo's got hair. We've been too long since I seen you.
Oh
Um,
man.
but I was gonna say, that chapter in my life was one of the most important, right? The chapter where everything went south, and I was cognizant enough to know to be grateful for the moment, even though it was a rough part. I knew that God was teaching me something here, that I had made some mistakes here, that I had not seen some things, but I was at least glad it happened at the time because I knew it wouldn't happen again. And know that most success stories involve some kind of crash. Like, you haven't read one book that doesn't have some
Mhm.
kind of crash in it, right? So to me, I was kind of like, well, I hope this is mine because I don't want to do this again. But it taught me a lot about what I'm talking about now, and it's why I am excited about investor season. This is not a scary time for me. It's an exciting time for me. You know what I'm saying? Like, it is. I'm like, bring it. Like, the more change, the better. Not our
Mhm.
lawsuit. Fine, more,
Bring
more
it.
change.
I
Bring it,
I love
because you
it.
know, you know what?
I
Yeah, and the agents are like, and by the way, it's giving agents power. I got agents high-fiving me when they get their buyer broker agreement right now. Like, they're excited about saying, here's my value, and this is how I work. Nope, can't go show you that until we discuss this. It's giving them power. I'm loving it already. It's only been like a week, but I'm already like getting agents like so proud they got their stuff signed. Where I had an agent bring me like a pretty big multi-million-dollar type of deal, and we brought it to a certain point, but at this point we don't move forward until we get that agreement. And guess what? They
Mhm.
got the agreement. So get excited, guys. We're with the right group at the right time with the right family. We've got people who've been through these seasons, and I'm ready to play. And Lake Mary showed us that this week, with the championship guild. So that's
that
that's
that
the way it
actually
rolls,
really
baby.
well. Hey man, it's important to wear the logo of winners. So like that team definitely proved out. I'm very curious. And this is my own personal observation. I've kind of seen you kind of shift. Like before I met you, while I've met you now, stuff like that. We're all through evolution, and you better be going through an evolution right now, or you're in that complacency spot, which is dangerous to your future, right? So I'm curious. You brought up Kanish, right? Who's actually one of my favorite characters in that movie, The Rounders, who is, he kind of plays the boring kind of, I'm going to play my chips. I'm just going to keep grinding. I'm going to keep winning, but nothing really big, right? And then there's Mike. Mike's the guy who's like, I'm going to put my whole thing in there. If you had to put yourself in a position because nobody's one or the other, what percentage would you say you are Kanish out of 100, and what percentage would you say you're Mike McDermott at
Great
this point
question.
in investor
So
season right now?
so for the crowd out there, but he's basically saying Kanish is the conservative guy who just plays the game and grinds it out and makes his money and feeds his family, and then Mike is the guy who's taking his shot.
He's going
I
all
lean
in.
toward, yeah, I will say I lean towards Mike. I lean towards Mike. Uh, the last cycle grounded me so that I can take the lesson. Here's what I'll tell you is you got to come up with your own strategy. I take something from Kanish, understanding that there has to be a strategy, that you should stick to your investment principles and all that good stuff. Kanish's goal was to keep food on his family's table. Mike was going for the world championship, right? And I'm a world championship guy because that excites me, right? So I lean towards Mike, but I take lessons from Kanish and understanding like, hey, but there's certain things you wouldn't do. Like, in other words, maybe I go with Mike and Mike put like, I think $30,000 and it's all he had. Maybe I would have just put 10, but I would still go for my shot.
All right. So there's this importance of having some balance there, right? So,
100%.
I want to give you, I want you to give me your percentage because I wrote down a percentage for myself. I'm just curious.
Oh, you
What
want
is,
me to give me a percentage?
yeah, what's your percentage Kanish versus Mike? So,
I'd say I'm 70 Mike, 30 Kanish.
okay, that's what I thought. Good stuff. For those of you guys who know what we're talking about, like Rounders is a great leadership movie on, because in leadership, we're going to get smacked in the mouth sometimes, right? And, the measure of a leader is, are you willing to stand back up, right? And continue to move forward towards what you consider your goal. I think another thing that Bobby mentioned here is really understanding those 4 questions, right? And of those 4 questions that Bobby mentioned, and you might have missed them, so I'm just going to repeat them right there, is what do you want? And Bobby referenced that freedom number, which, by the way, you could pay somebody tens of thousands of dollars as a financial advisor to teach you what Bobby just taught you, the freedom number. Whatever your freedom number is, just write down this formula, right? Freedom number is, you take your freedom number and you divide it by 5%, right? So you said, hey, I need to live on, if I could have $80,000 a year coming to me and I don't have any other debts, I can live off 80 grand. Well, you take that 80,000 divided by 5%, and that's your freedom number. That's the number you need to have to be able to get $80,000 residual coming to your bank account off of a modest 5%, right? And then the second question he asked you was, by when do you want it? And that's a really good question, right? Like, you don't want it the day before you died, right? You want to be, at some point, you want to be able to enjoy life. So at what point do you want it? And then the next question was, what are you willing to risk? And it might be the most valuable question because there's something that you're going to have to let go, and it might be your identity. It might be laughter. It might be, being able to chill out on the weekends. It might be, being friends to certain people, right? Because you're going to have to get obsessed and they're not going to understand your obsession. They're not going to understand why you don't have time to talk about what's on Netflix and all you want to talk is about investing, right? Like Bobby, like if you talk to Bobby about investing, that conversation doesn't happen, right? If I talk to Bobby about like some Netflix show and that has nothing to do with that, he's like, whatever. Like, talk to me about winning. Because that's where his track is. So you're gonna have to risk losing some friends and things of that nature. What else are you willing to risk? And then the most important question is, what are you willing to do? Because actions get results, but no actions get no results, right? So you got to be willing to do something, and it has to be something different. And you might have to learn a few new skills. You might have to invest in yourself, the way Bobby mentioned. But that is the key, right? So I think if there's one thing you got is that those 4 questions. Ask yourself those questions with a cup of coffee or some tea or even some wine or whatever, and just really don't let yourself allow yourself to just answer the question. Really ponder the questions. Your new results will become from the answers that you get from those questions. So, Bobby, I salute you. Incredible job. Ring the bell. Gap Mastermind winner right here. It was an incredible opportunity to kind of see the way you think and how you've evolved in investor season and things of nature. And I don't know, did you mention that there was an ebook or something like that? And how to get that?
It's not quite ready for prime
So do they
time, but
do they
you
just
guys are the
email
first
you?
to preview. You guys are the
Yeah.
first to preview.
Do you guys want to? Do you want to? Can they just put their name down to get released when it comes out release, or how would
Okay.
they?
We'll let the
Social
global
media?
alliance know when it's ready. We'll let the global
Okay.
alliance know.
All right, good stuff. Or just follow Investor Season on Instagram, and you can kind of keep up with us. I'm sure that's probably where he'll announce it anyway. But I want to appreciate all of you guys. Growth, action, production. We're out. See you guys at EXP Cup.